There are some powerful conversations countries hope will quietly expire, and reparations is one of them. For years, Britain treated reparations as a moral debate, emotional, abstract, inconvenient, and safely postponed. Something to acknowledge politely and then avoid indefinitely. But in 2026, that strategy is breaking down because Africa and the Caribbean are no longer asking the question, they're organizing around it. Reparations didn't disappear, they matured. And if you want more Africa First stories that Western media ignores, hit subscribe. We don't chase the headlines, we chase the truth. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why reparations are no longer a protest slogan, but a coordinated political and economic agenda that Britain can no longer treat as symbolic.
UK's history of colonization and slavery has long been under the spotlight, and now calls for payment of reparations are growing louder. A leading judge at the International Court of Justice has said United Kingdom will no longer be able to ignore the calls for paying reparations for transatlantic slavery. Judge Patrick Robinson said that world over the tide on slavery reparations was turning around. He urged the United Kingdom to change its stance on the issue and consider paying compensation for years of abuse that African slaves endured under their rule. Robinson said, and I quote him here, "Reparations have been paid for other wrongs and obviously far more quickly, far more speedily than reparations for what I consider the greatest atrocity and the crime in the history of mankind, transatlantic slavery." The comments come on the heels of a report published by Robinson in June this year. The 115-page document titled Reparations for Transatlantic Slavery in America and the Caribbean has calculated and detailed that UK alone is obligated to pay a whopping $24 trillion as reparations for slavery in 14 countries. Those against reparations have often questioned calculations behind the skyrocketing figures, compensatory damages. Now let's take a look at the factors considered for accurately calculating the trust cost in the aftermath of slavery. Loss of life and liberty during the period of slavery, stolen potential of foregone earnings, recognition of intergenerational trauma, loss of heritage, disparities in life expectancy, opportunity cost of employment and income, and most importantly, the calculations include the wealth and GDP amassed by countries that exploited African labor. Well, the global voices for reparations have been growing louder for some time now. In July, leader of the community of Latin American and Caribbean states, Ralph Gonsalves, said that they are considering approaching the United Nations International Court of Justice for a legal opinion on demanding compensation from 10 European countries over slavery.
So let's be precise. Reparations is not a new idea. They've been demanded across Africa and the Caribbean for decades. So what is new is the level of organization and the level of detail. So in the Caribbean, CARICOM governments have formalized reparations frameworks aimed at former colonial powers, particularly Britain. So in Africa, the African Union has declared a decade of reparations beginning in 2026, elevating the issue from activism to continental policy. So this isn't symbolism. It signals that reparations are now being treated as an economic question, a developmental question, and a sovereignty question. And here's the part Britain finds hardest to manage. So this conversation comes with numbers, right? Researchers and legal analysts working with Caribbean reparations efforts have already placed a conservative monetary estimate above $24 trillion calculated from forced labor, extracted resources, suppressed wages, and loss of development. And even those involved acknowledge that 24 trillion is a floor, not a ceiling, because much of Africa's contribution was never priced at market value. It was priced at coercion or and others, right? So history didn't get shorter. It just got itemized, right? So that's how they got that base number of 24 trillion for UK alone. So what Western audiences assume in Britain and much of the West, reparations are framed as demands for guilt, unrealistic financial payouts, or backward-looking grievances policies, right? And that framing is convenient because it keeps discussions emotional and avoids accounting or accountability. So what's actually happening here is that what's unfolding is technical, strategic, and deliberate. African and Caribbean leaders are reframing reparations as restorative justice, not charity or not punishment. And that's why CARICOM's framework isn't a single demand, but a program. Formal apologies, public health repair, education and cultural restitution, institutional rebuilding, debt relief and restructuring, and a long-term development mechanism. So not one check, not one apology, a systemic response to systemic extraction, right? So now let's be clear about something Britain rarely says out loud. So its industrial rise was not abstract. Africa and the Caribbean provided forced and unpaid labor, plantation commodities and raw materials, colonial tax systems, and controlled trade routes. So Britain converted that extracted value into ports and shipping networks, banking and insurance institutions, and industrial scale state power, and generational wealth accumulation, railways, factories. I mean, the list really goes on. So reparations are not a debate about what Africa failed to build. They're a debate about what Britain was able to build because Africa was prevented from building it first, right? So when Caribbean delegations brought this agenda to Britain in 2025, the response wasn't engagement. It was silence. So no senior ministers, no policy dialogue, no formal position, not rejection, just avoidance, right? And reparations, are no longer about persuasion. They're about agenda setting. So Africa and the Caribbean are asserting the right to define how history is measured, how developmental gaps are explained, and how justice enters modern global systems. So oftentimes people say reparations are too complex to address, but governments built on centuries of extraction have to address it. So why does this matter, right? There's a huge political impact. So coordination changes leverage. So this is no longer Jamaica alone, no longer Ghana alone. It's a block level alignment. And blocks don't ask politely, they negotiate. So reparations reframed as restoration challenges a foundational Western myth that Europe's wealth emerged independently, when in reality, extraction created a one-way pipeline and value flowed out, right? Institutional scale was the value lands, and compounding advantage became permanent. So that's the economic architecture of the empire. And the $24 plus trillion estimate matters not because it's the final number, but because it moves the conversation from morality into accounting. And most serious analysts agree the true figure is likely, compounded or exponentially higher, right? So why? Well, first, compounding, right? Stolen labor didn't just generate profit, it generated reinvested profit over centuries. Second, the opportunity cost. The biggest theft wasn't just what was taken, it was what never got built. So industries, institutions, technologies, and capital ecosystems. Thirdly, structural lock-in. So colonial systems didn't end cleanly at independence. They often converted into debt, trade dependency, and externally designed developmental models. So this means that the injury kept producing outcomes long after the empire formally ended. And that's why reparations aren't about giving money. They're about repairing a system that still collects interest on the past. So reparations also reclaim narrative power. They reject the idea that Africa and the Caribbean must move on while others continue to benefit from inherited advantage. So only beneficiaries of history demand amnesia, right? So what's next? So three developments are coming. One, reparations will become institutional, so expect commissions, legal research, economic modeling, and diplomatic pressure, not street slogans. So Africa is shifting from protest to process. Secondly, Britain's position will grow increasingly isolated. So avoidance works only when claims are fragmented, and it fails when coordination becomes continental. Silence becomes a policy position. Thirdly, development language will continue with or without consent. So aid, debt, and climate finance conversations will increasingly reference historical responsibility, whether Britain agrees or not. And then fourth, the debate will shift from how much to how. So when numbers sound large, the goal becomes dismissal. So the real battlefield becomes mechanisms, right? Debt restructuring, long-term development compacts, targeted public health investments, institutional partnerships. So moving from fantasy, from theatrics to structured repair. So in the future, we'll examine what a serious reparations framework could actually look like without slogan and without denial. So the closing truth here is history doesn't expire, it negotiates. So, mashallah, that's your African insight for today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because I'm Mr. EmpowerTV. We don't chase the headlines, we chase the truth behind them. This is Mr. Empower, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.